Let's go. Well, I have this time a lot.
All right, that's dope, man. I appreciate your time here, man. Um, Here on the Prison to Promise podcast. And so I just want to jump right in, man, and
Let's
ask
do it.
you, yeah, if you can introduce yourself to the people.
Well, my name is Kenny Robinson, and I am the executive director and founder of Freedom Fighting Missionaries, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that I founded back in 2020 to serve the justice involved population, which includes those who are formerly incarcerated, those who are exiting jails and prisons, those who are justice involved, having gone through the court system at some point, whether that is them themselves or their immediate family, which could
Hmm.
be a spouse, a father, a mother, or a brother. As we know, um, justice involvement impacts a whole entire family uh, and is generational.
Yes.
So we serve that entire population with the intent of self sufficiency.
Dig it. And so I know and understand, man, that you are the founder and the executive director of the Freedom Fighting Missionaries. And I'd like maybe if you could tell listeners a little bit about yourself prior to becoming the founder and the executive director um, of this organization.
Well, me myself have justice involvement myself, starting at a young age. I went into federal prison at the age of 24 and was released at the age of 34 on a bank robbery conviction after two trials. I went to trial with the feds, and the first trial ended in a mistrial hung jury. Had one juror who refused to cast his vote for not guilty. Of course, the federal government tried the case again, uh, and I mean pulled out all of the stops the next time around. That was my first time out, having going to prison. I had been in and out of jail
Yeah.
from the time I was a juvenile, but I had never went to prison. Um, and served a 10-year sentence first time out. Uh, Actually, got 5 extra years for the criminal history that I did not have.
How
I
about
received,
that?
yeah, I received the upward departure based off my criminal history didn't truly reflect the seriousness of the things that they said I was involved in. So they gave me 5 extra years for the record I did not have.
Probably trying to get you for stuff that they think you did, but they didn't catch you for. You
Right,
know,
right,
folks was real mad at you taking their money. You
right,
know,
right,
right on. And
right.
so you did a whole dime, man. And as you and I know, because I done time in New York, I did 8 years on the 4 to 12. I've been out over 20 joints. But as you and I know, prison typically it has negative impacts on people's psychological, emotional well-being. And for you to have done a dime and then to come out and to find success in your life, how did you how did you avoid being impacted to the point where you couldn't become successful in your life or where success was limited? Like what did you do while you were incarcerated and upon your release to I guess find yourself on the trajectory that you're on?
Well, thankfully for me, um, although I only have a ninth grade education on paper and then a GED to follow that, I had good reading comprehension skills. Uh, was raised by my grandmothers, and I had a father in my father was in my life. Um, so I had various upbringing from New York to North Carolina. Um, and I had a village of supporters throughout my life. Uh, so when I got in prison, that continued. The OGs, were uh, naturally drawn to me. Having seen many different people over time, right? They have an eye for those who have potential to be, greater and to move past that. And many of the
Indeed.
brothers on the inside invested in me, and helped me to stay straight on the inside. So I never even got a shot in there. I mean, all of the COs, the lieutenants, the associate wardens. I had good relationships with everybody on the inside,
Mhm.
and all of the different races, gangs, religions, and all of that. And that was primarily because a brother out of Dallas, Texas, named Ken Henderson, uh, took his time and invested in me. He was the brother who, did all of the Black History programs, Juneteenth programs, orchestrated, all of the community events that were held on the inside, and taught me how to do that, right? And worked with me. I was always, soft spoken, well spoken, and he introduced me to Toastmasters, right? I took that, became a Toastmaster general, taught that for about 3 years on the inside.
And so, for people who don't know what Toastmasters are or is, can you explain that?
Yeah, Toastmasters is an international organization that teaches the art of public speaking, where public speaking is one of the greatest fears that most people have. And it teaches how to storytell, how to, put your words together, how to articulate yourself in front of an audience.
Right on.
So, I was doing I learned how to do the Black History programs, Juneteenth programs, uh, and all of the other religions, whether they was Catholic, Muslims, Nation, Morris Science, Five Percenters. I had great relationships with all of the chaplains.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
How about now?
Yeah, I got you. And you were saying you were
Yeah,
having you had great relationships with all the chaplains and all the religious organizations and representatives inside the penitentiary.
that's correct. So, we developed programs on the inside that mentored to some of the youth in there. I ended up
Mhm.
working with the psychology department. So, point being, I was very active on the inside and well respected for doing things that's positive. So I
Yeah,
was working on my release when I had 6 years left, right?
right on, right
And
on.
soaking up everything I could soak up from the many different, cultures that's on the inside, whether that
Yeah,
was Italians, Irish, um, Mexican, black, white, black from the South, black from the West, because it's a difference, right, within our
yeah,
cultures. Same thing
absolutely.
within the cultures of, the white America, right? You had
Hmm.
white preppy America, you had dirty white boy America, you had
Yeah,
redneck,
yeah. All these
um,
subcultures, subgroups. Same with
yeah,
like Spanish speaking populations as well.
right, right. So I mean, I just had a knack for being able to get close to people and have them to trust in me, so
Hmm.
much so that when I was in the Life Connection program in Petersburg, Virginia, me and the head of the Aryan Brotherhood became best friends, right? And
About
ate
that.
together, worked out together, um, learned from each other, right? We both
Hmm.
came up poor, right? That he was taught what he was taught about us, and we was taught what we was taught about him.
Right.
And he had never had a conversation, an in-depth conversation with a black man, and I had never had an in-depth conversation with a racist who said that they was racist, right, and
Yeah. Wow.
admitted that this is their beliefs and why. So he and I became good friends, and so the stage was set, for my release.
Yeah.
But upon my release, the reality hits, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
how you gonna eat? Where you gonna live? Where you gonna work at? Who's gonna provide health care for you? Right now,
Right.
I just need an identification, right, to even get to the next step,
And
right,
we
and
know
some
how tough that
transportation.
is.
Right. So I went through all of those things uh, upon my release. I've relocated to Charlotte, North Carolina, and came to the halfway house here.
Mhm.
Um, I had some family that lived here. My sister had moved here uh, while I was away, and I was under the false impression that if I came to the largest city in North Carolina, which is Charlotte, that was growing, that surely somebody would let me clean their bathroom, right? Or hold
Mhm.
up a flag out on a construction site, work in a warehouse, right?
Something.
Right, something, right? Because this is pre-COVID stuff to where, just certain jobs that they only going to let us do. Right? And I was willing to do that with a goal of getting to $10 an hour, and maybe I could make it from there. Right.
Right.
Even though I had 5 children who were in immediate need, right? And immediate need means things like tampons, lotion, tissue, right?
Mhm.
Hygiene products, immediate need. With my oldest daughter, having been 7 years old when I left and 17 when I got back graduating high school. And it's
Wow.
cap and gown day, right? Or it's picture day. And
Yeah,
I'm
man.
out now, right? And, they're looking to you. So I'm in the halfway house trying to get a job. They threatened to send me back to prison for not being able to get a job.
Man, ain't that bass backwards? We're gonna send you back
Yeah,
to prison because you can't find a job.
because you can't
Understanding
find a job.
with the understanding that people who come out of prison are being heavily discriminated against. So yeah, that's real heavy. But hey,
Right.
man,
So
if
I
I
was
could,
going through that.
hmm
Hmm.
and and you were going through what everybody else goes through coming out of prison.
Right. That's
But
right.
one of the things or a couple of things I heard that's consistent though, and that is that you were preparing to face these obstacles and work over, around, or through these impediments, whatever they might have been. But something else that was real powerful that you talked about earlier was you had relationships, man. You know, you had supportive pro-social relationships. You had a mom, you had a dad or grandmoms, you know, you had people that continued to support you throughout your time in prison. And even when you got in prison, you began to develop relationships with people who could help nurture you and help, I guess, move the needle forward because they saw the potential in you. And that sounds very consistent with my experience and the experience of many other people I've talked to on this platform. And so I just want to point to I guess, the importance of having um, relationships, rich relationships where people can tie you into opportunities to develop yourself for your own good and for the good of those around you.
Right. And once again, I was blessed to have that, and then
Yeah,
to have some natural gifts. Right. But there's not an expectation that everybody has that. So much
yeah,
so that it has to be taught. So one of
yeah,
our components of our program is to teach relationship building, because everybody hasn't had a relationship with even a parent. Right. We work with people who have aged out of the foster care system. They've
yeah,
never had a parent, right, and
yeah.
haven't had loved ones and stuff. So you're
And even
right.
if they
That is
did have relationships, they probably, I'm sorry for cutting in, man, but I'm thinking even if they did have relationships, maybe those weren't the healthiest relationships.
that's correct. That's correct. And then you still can, learn from that, right, and
Indeed,
grow, right. Or
indeed.
you could, like some people become hardened, right, and it's a tougher to crack that because they haven't never had not even one person to invest fully in them, the human being that they are, right,
Yeah, man.
not the inmate that they called them, right, or the
Mhm,
black person that they called them, or the poor person that they
mhm,
called them, right, but just the
mhm.
human being having been alive on earth, haven't had that type of investment.
Yeah,
So if I could get back um to try to get to where I'm at now,
yeah, man.
um I struggled to find employment, eventually became employed with Goodwill, making 7.25 an hour, getting people's trash out of their cars, right? People take their trash to the Goodwill versus the dump, right?
Right.
Um and of course it was a struggle trying to make it off of that small amount of money, but I never gave up. And again, relationship building. I had a counselor at Goodwill who is now a good friend of mine, Verona Hendricks, who invested time in me to take me to job interviews, to encourage me to continue to take training opportunities and not settle for 725, and to help me work through the mental health challenges that's associated with a transition, that's
Yeah.
associated with poverty, that's
Yeah.
associated with glass ceilings because of, right.
Hmm.
She helped me work through that, and
Yeah.
eventually I was able to beg my way into a car dealership. Um, and once I got in there, the biggest difference for me was the digital divide was immediately broken. Right, I had a desk, I had a computer, I had access to the internet, and I was able to train and learn that way visually, and also by reading and repetition. And in 6 months, became a top salesperson there, and then in a year, top salesperson in the city. So I went from minimum wage to around 58,000 in my first year, and around
Nice.
80,000 in my second year, which allowed me to provide for my children, get them through uh, high school, and get the basic needs, things that I needed, and to grow.
Yeah.
Um, and I did so well in that business that one of the owners of the dealership invested in me yet again, gave me an opportunity to go to finance school, and sent me down to Houston, Texas to learn finance. And
Wow.
in finance school, a component there is to be, FCC compliant, which teaches you how to handle sensitive information, how to store it, destroy it digitally and manually. So, I learned, and I had a certification on handling social security numbers and, sensitive information. And I eventually went from there, came back, became a finance manager, and then was eventually promoted up to a sales manager, which gave me the ability to hire. Again, working with the same owner who believed in the power of second chances. Gabriel Faria is his name. um, a grinder, right? A top sales guy from um, from Connecticut who believed in second chances. Came up on the same side of the tracks that we did, being a Brazilian immigrant, his family. So once I got the authority to hire, I went to him, and he and I, got together and decided that we would give people a second chance. So we hired, he and I together, around a little over 12 people. Um, I trained them, he trained them, we invested in them. Many of them went on to become managers, homeowners, and successful. And we became known in the community for being able to assist individuals with second chance employment opportunities that's career driven, right? And people were following my success story on social media, and would send me messages and say, my mom's getting out, she's been in there 12 years, she's smart, my son, my nephew, my dad can be like you, he just needs an opportunity, right? So I became known in the community for that.
Mhm.
And in 2019, I made a decision, having hit the glass ceiling, right? They're not going to let me have my own dealership because, in
Right.
fact, less than 1% of all of the dealerships worldwide in the history of the automobile have been Black owned and operated,
Right
right?
on.
So I made the decision that I was going to retire in December of 2019 and start a nonprofit in 2020, and some for-profit businesses, and do what my passion was, which is to help others have opportunities at a second chance, like what was given to me. Right, investments were made in me, even if they were just conversational, sitting,
Right on.
listening, talking, encouraging me to to keep pushing forward. And I wanted to give back in that way, so I started the nonprofit in 2020. um, None of us knew that COVID was going to come,
Hmm.
right? I had a plan to teach others how to navigate around the barriers that exist, right? Not trying or attempting or believing that we could tear down these barriers that are hundreds of years old, right? But
Deeply
I knew
rooted.
that we can absolutely, I knew that we can navigate around them because I had done it, right? And within most systems, there's a person inside of the system that cares, right? So I knew that if you could get to Miss Mary in healthcare, if you could get to John at the DMV, if you could get to this person, right, in these different areas, that that person would help you to move forward, believing that um, given a second chance that a person could thrive, and
Yeah,
that
man.
was the basis of our program in the beginning, right? And I had a plan to assist maybe 5 to 8 individuals a month, and then COVID did come, right? And things shut down in the way that they shut down. And many more people were displaced: the elderly, the sick, the homeless, single mothers and their children who were evicted in February, and then the shutdown happened in March, right? So I was called out to the streets, right, where the people were, and we went out there in 2 masks and gloves and laptop connected to a cell phone to assist individuals who were exiting out of the jail and living on the streets. Everybody qualified for a stimulus, but everybody didn't have a cell phone or
Or an
an address
address.
in the last
Yeah.
7 years, right? And those individuals needed help on the streets to connect with those things like food stamps, housing assistance, healthcare assistance, and we was out on the streets doing that. And then George Floyd happened, right? So now here we are assisting 50 to 80 people a month, and it's ranging from children to the elderly, um, and became huge protesters here in the city of Charlotte,
Right. I
um,
remember.
staging a protest outside of the detention center for 110 days, right, assisting individuals as they were exiting right out of the jail 24/7, right, with a team of supporters that range from people who were homeless to doctors, nurses,
Mm.
medics, psychologists, therapists,
How'd you get
right?
all those people together, man? How'd you get all those
They
people to
came
do that?
they came together in the name of George Floyd protests, COVID, and just injustices to humanity. And
Right.
it crossed even political lines, right? We had a lot of liberals, but we also had a lot of Republicans that said, you know what, this just isn't right,
Mm.
right? Where people are living on side of the highway in tents, right? And
Yeah.
where's our government, right? And and who's the people that's actually going to help them? And that was us. All of the grassroots organizations, which in Charlotte means Black founded or Black led organizations, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we went through 2020 like that. Um, no funding, right? You a Black led organization serving a population that can't even vote, right? So it's two places where politicians don't go to stump, right? They don't go to elementary schools, right? Because children can't vote, and they don't talk to justice involved people because they can't vote, right? So here you are trying to serve this population where funding doesn't even exist in the way that it should for it.
Right. So you
So
basically broke at
2020
that point.
self-funded. Yeah. I mean, we're using our own money, right? I'm using my 401k savings and whatever I had. Money didn't matter. We're in a pandemic, right? And the
Right.
people who are suffering the most look like me, and the
Right.
people who are dying the most look like me,
Hmm.
right? Or my grandmother, right? Because
Right.
again, we had people who were 70 and 80 years old who we were serving, right? Uh, so in 2020, we self-funded, raised around 178,000, assisted around 57 individuals with direct services and hundreds with
Monumental.
indirect services. Uh-huh. Begging everybody for, funding, right, and for help, which included the government, the banks, foundations, private donors, right, very visible on social media doing the work. Um, And in 2021, we shifted our focus away from traditional sources of funding and focused on the healthcare field, specifically behavioral health. And we were able to convince the CEO of the behavioral healthcare system, which was Cardinal Innovations at that time, convinced that CEO to come down, right, and meet with us in the community. And he and I had coffee and breakfast and talked, and I was able to show him some of the things that we're talking about. That his healthcare hospital was supposed to be helping these people, received COVID dollars specifically for people like me and those that, were in the community. And he gave me an opportunity to present to their board for a community reinvestment grant. Right. It was up to me to convince them. So I pitched to their board that if you're black, have a criminal background, and are a Charlotte native, that in fact you have a disability equivalent to a blind man, right?
Yeah.
You could still get a job, but a certain kind, right? You could
Hmm.
still live somewhere, but a certain place, right? And
Right.
you could get health care, but a certain level of health care because of your disability, right? And I explained to them that the difference between us and the blind man, well, the blind man had somewhere to go. He could go
Right.
over there to the place for the blind, right? And they'll help them, right? But there was no building that you can
No
walk
place to
into
help the
coming out of
formerly
jail or
incarcerated.
prison, right? And I explained to them that we had individuals exiting federal prison having served 15 years or more. The projects that they were born and raised in is no more. There's a little white lady over there with a little dog, what used to
Yep.
be their hood, right? And that person was getting dropped off at the shelter by their probation officer, who would then speed away. And the person would walk into the shelter, where the shelter would offer him a tent and a mask and a small bottle of hand sanitizer and tell him somebody out there will show you where you can set your tent up at. All right. So I explained that to them, and we got our first grant from them, and that was 100,000, which allowed me to hire two staff, do more advocacy work, more fundraising, formalize our program into the four major components that it is today, which are identifications, health followed by healthcare, employment, and housing, temporary, emergency, and permanent housing. So those are the four components of our program. Was able to hire an accountant and get a lawyer to come on pro bono. Had begged one of the buildings in Uptown Charlotte to let us, utilize some office space. They gave us that space for free going into 2021. Uh, and that grant jump started us and allowed me to get another 75,000 from them. That was
Hmm.
more associated with education around COVID and the vaccines. We held one of the largest COVID information and vaccine events in Charlotte. And in 2021, we ended up serving around 157 individuals, provided permanent housing for 12 families who were homeless, and we raised around 400,000 in 2021,
And hey, man,
and
speaking of
built up some
housing,
credibility.
I think I saw or I read somewhere where y'all are working on building some townhouses now for formerly
That is
incarcerated
correct.
people. Right
That
on.
is
That's what's up.
correct. That's correct. So going into 2022, we built up credibility. You know, I didn't leave no system untouched, which
Hmm.
includes government, banking, foundations, uh, healthcare, social services, the news media, right,
Hmm.
who historically portray us in a negative light, right? And then
Monsters.
anytime we're doing anything positive, we didn't get the spotlight that we needed. So I
Crickets.
I attacked them as well. And going
Nice.
into 2022, we started to get more news coverage and exposure, right?
Hmm.
And was also working the city council and the county commissioners who are as black as you and I, right? And explain to them what the struggles are, right? I joined the Continuum of Care Board for homelessness in a seat that they created specifically for me, systemic advocacy. and I joined the Equity and Inclusion Committee and became the chairperson of that committee for Mecklenburg County. Right, so I was on a lot of meetings and Zooms and board
Yeah.
meetings and speaking
Yeah.
at City Council. So in 2022, when COVID money was released from the American Rescue Plan Act, we applied. I had told the county commissioners that we struggle writing grants, right? We're not professional grant writers, right? We're frontline workers, and I asked them to help me with that process, and they sent me to UNC Charlotte, where some professors and interns got with me and helped me to write the grant. And miraculously, right, from our advocacy, which includes advocacy from you and many of us around the state of North Carolina, right,
Hmm.
getting the message and the word out during those times, using every medium, including podcasts.
Wow.
All of those things contributed to us receiving the largest grant that any reentry organization in the history of Charlotte had ever received, especially
Hmm.
one that was Black founded, and that was for 750,000 from
That's
Mecklenburg
dope.
County, right? Which again allowed us to expand our programs, the amount of people that we can serve, and then to focus on housing. Where I had also advocated to HUD, right, in Washington, D.C., um, where the good sister Marsha Fudge, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, had
Big up
issued
to the
out a
sister.
memo. Right. She had issued out a memo that said emergency housing vouchers that were being issued out because of COVID, formerly incarcerated and criminal justice involved individuals should have an opportunity for some of those vouchers. And she encouraged the continuum of cares and the housing authorities around the country to consider that population.
Hmm.
Again, serving on the continuum of care board at that time, I was able to advocate for some of those vouchers to go specifically to criminal justice involved individuals. And again, miraculously, they allocated um, four Section 8 vouchers to our organization, who was only 2 years old at that time,
Hmm.
right?
And those are
Uh,
valuable, especially for people that are
the,
getting
the most
DHHS.
the most important piece of paper in the history of poverty is a Section 8 voucher, right? And that's because it's a 5 year waiting list to get one
Right
across
on.
the country,
Right on.
right? So we had those vouchers. We eventually housed those four people,
Hmm.
and we got a church and the other developers and stuff to um, consider a land donation so we can
Hmm.
build our own housing.
Right on.
Went back to Mecklenburg County, where they again miraculously awarded us a $1.3 million grant to
Wow.
build our own housing.
Wow. That's
An
beautiful.
organization named LISC came on and agreed to fund us with $2 million for the project. And the
Mm.
city of Charlotte, I'm battling right now for $1 million to complete that project, while working on a second project that the city of Charlotte funded, so we could build 21 townhouses. So we are
Yo.
working on 37 townhouses right now.
Hmm.
Funding from Wells Fargo, Ally Bank, Foundation of Carolinas, many private donations, the United Way. We have
This
our
is
own
amazing,
transition
man.
house. Yeah,
This is amazing hearing you, man, and hearing your story. And one of the things I'm thinking about is this man used to take these people's money, and now they giving them money to help folks. You know?
absolutely. And
Yeah.
getting on
So
TV saying that the bank, right? And I'm not
yeah.
talking about $5,000, right? I'm talking
Right.
about
Right.
Wells
Millions.
Fargo has Wells Fargo has funded us somewhere close to 250,000 since we
Yeah.
started, and we went from zero to around 7 million since we
That's awesome.
started. Yeah, I'm on a
So look.
capital campaign right now to raise 8.2 million this year, and we have
Wow.
raised 6.2 million of that so far.
Moving forward, man, I want to talk more with you about maybe raising money for some of the work I'm doing here. But we're coming up on about 2 minutes left on our time together, and so I just wanted to highlight the amazing work that you've been doing. And then in our last couple of minutes, ask you if there was any words of wisdom that you could drop on another brother or sister who's coming out of the penitentiary. What would one of those jewels be?
That there are brothers and sisters and people in the community who do care about you and are currently advocating on your behalf before you get out. And there is an opportunity for complete self-sufficiency on an individual basis. Now, as a whole, we are still fighting the effects of mass incarceration. Poverty being the fourth leading cause of death in the United States is a barrier. But as an individual, there is no limits. Right? I just closed on my first home in June of this year. Right. So
Right on.
home ownership is attainable. It is
Right on.
possible. Right. I'm not from the Silver Spoon. I'm from the projects in Hempstead, New
Right.
York.
Right
Right.
on.
And raised by grandmothers like many of us. So, I would encourage brothers and sisters to keep on pressing. And as an individual, you can get there.
Right on. And last thing, Kenny, because we got less than a minute. How can people reach you?
Freedom Fighting Missionaries is now Googleable. So you can just Google Freedom Fighting Missionaries. It's going to come up across all mediums: LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter X, and every other platform. So just Google us at Freedom Fighting Missionaries. Take it from there.
Yo, man. And with that, I'm going to call it a wrap and tell you thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And I'll be